Hello learners, welcome back to our YouTube channel. This is the statistics interview questions playlist and we have brought another interesting statistics interview question for you. This is the most frequently asked interview questions related to statistics and it is asked in many interviews of machine learning as well as of data science. So let's begin with the question. The question is, what is the difference between type 1 error and type 2 error? So basically, this is a question which is related to machine learning as well as to data science, and it is a major part of statistics. Okay, so type 1 error is in statistical hypothesis testing is the error caused by rejecting a null hypothesis when it is true. Whereas type 2 error is the error that occurs when we fail to reject null hypothesis when it is not true. So basically, what is a null hypothesis and what is an alternative hypothesis? So basically, when we are performing a test, suppose the test is that a fertilizer, okay, we have to test whether a fertilizer is effective on a plant or not. Okay, so consider this is a plant and we need to check whether certain fertilizer F is effective on this plant or not. So we will consider the null hypothesis, which is denoted by H0, as the fertilizer is not effective, and the alternative hypothesis H1 will be considered as the fertilizer is effective. So basically, whenever we want to perform a test, null hypothesis will always be rejecting the relationship between two variables. Here, the two variables will be fertilizer and the plant. Okay, and this is the alternative hypothesis, which is in opposite to the null hypothesis. So basically, this is how a statistical testing is being done. Whenever we perform a test, we consider two hypotheses or two results of the test. First, which is said to be null hypothesis, and the second, which is said to be alternative hypothesis. So null hypothesis is always in opposition of the relationship between two variables, but null hypothesis is with the relationship between two variables. So here the null hypothesis will be that the fertilizer will have no effect on the plant, whereas the alternative hypothesis will be that the fertilizer has some effect on the plant. Okay, so the type 1 error is occurred when we reject a null hypothesis when it is true. Okay, which means we will reject the null hypothesis when it is true, means here in our example that we considered, the null hypothesis is that there is no relation, okay, there is no effect of the fertilizer on the plant. So we will reject this null hypothesis, okay, when it is not true. It is not true as in, when it is true. So there is no relation, there is no effect of the fertilizer on the plant, still we reject it, okay. So that is why the type 1 error will be caused. But the type 2 error will be caused when we fail to reject null hypothesis, which means when we accept the null hypothesis when it is not true. So it is not true, still we accept it. So that is the type 2 error. Okay. So basically we'll see further more examples of type 1 and type 2 error. So here this is a chart which denotes, see, this is the measured data or the measured result, and this is the real result, okay, reality and measured. So if both the reality and the measured is true, then the answer is correct. Okay. If the reality is false, but we get the answer as true, then this is the type 1 error, which is false positive. But if the reality is true and we get the answer as false, then this is the type 2 error or the false negative. And basically, if both are false, then the prediction is correct. Okay, this we have seen in confusion matrix. Okay, this is a form of a confusion matrix which we have seen, okay, in machine learning. Okay, so basically, type 1 error is also called as false positive, and type 2 error is also called as false negative, which means the prediction is false and it is also negative. and false positive means the prediction is false but it is positive. Okay, so this is an example of type 1 error. So for this example, let us take a hypothesis where a player is trying to find the relationship between him wearing new shoes and the number of wins for his team. So the test that we are performing is that a player wearing new shoes and the wins of his team. A player is trying to find the relationship between him wearing new shoes and the times that his team is winning. So basically here the null hypothesis is that there is no relationship between the wins and the shoes. Correct? No relationship between the wins and the shoes. And the alternative hypothesis will be that yes, there is a relationship between the wins and his shoes. But if you try to understand it logically, there shouldn't be any relationship between him wearing new shoes and him winning, correct? So here if the number of wins for his team is more than he was wearing his new shoes, okay, then the number of wins for his team otherwise, then he might accept the null hypothesis and determine that there is a relationship. Okay, so if the number of him wearing the shoes, okay, and the wins he gets is equal, or even if it is close, then he will accept the null hypothesis. But the winning of his team might be influenced by just chance rather than his shoes, which means that the wins can be caused by any other reason, correct? So in that case it is a type 1 error because it has no relationship. But in this case he should accept the null hypothesis because the winning of a team might be happening due to luck or chance. Okay, this should be the correct answer. Okay, but if he chooses this, if the player chooses alternative hypothesis, then it is a type 1 error because he rejected the null hypothesis even when it was true. We know that this is true, which means basically this is the reality, but the player chose H1, which is the measured value. He chose H1, which is the measured value. So basically we rejected the null hypothesis even when it was true. So this is the type 1 error, when we reject null hypothesis even when it is true. Okay, so this is an example of a type 1 error. Now let's see an example of type 2 error. So in a type 2 error, assume a biotechnology company which wants to compare how effective two of its vaccines are for preventing COVID-19. Okay, so two vaccines are there and we have to see that how are the two vaccines effective for preventing COVID-19. So basically if the two medications, just a second. These are the two vaccines. So here our null hypothesis will be that the just a second. Okay, so the null hypothesis will be that two medicines are equally effective. They are equally effective, and the alternative hypothesis will be that they are not equally effective. Okay, so this is the null hypothesis and this is the alternative hypothesis. So in this case, if the two medications are not equal, then the alternative hypothesis should be rejected. Null hypothesis should be rejected and alternative hypothesis should be chosen. But if the biotech company does not reject the null hypothesis, which means if it accepts the null hypothesis, then it will be a type 2 error. Why? Because this is the reality, which means this is the real answer, but the company predicted this as the answer. Okay, they think that they are equally effective, but they are not equally effective in the first place. So this is the type 2 error where we fail to reject null hypothesis, which means we accept null hypothesis even when it is true. Okay, oh sorry, when it is not true. So it is not true that they are equally effective, but still we accept null hypothesis. So this is the type 2 error, wherein we should have accepted alternative hypothesis, but we accepted null hypothesis even when it is not true. So this is the type 2 error. Okay. So I hope you understood both the examples of null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. And basically, when you explain the difference between null hypothesis and alternative, then first you have to explain the definition, then the difference, and then explain it with two examples as I showed you over here. So I hope you liked this video. You can share it with your friends. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, so do subscribe it ASAP. And yes, we'll be meeting in the next video. Thank you.